This is an open letter to the Sane Society. I got this guy, he was saying something like what has been promoted in the right wing media. He was saying that basically the idea that maybe somebody or some people, let's say George Soros and apparently people like him, have, are investing money in in order to bring down our nice capitalist system, nice freedom loving capitalist system. These guys are investing money in that in order to bring down our very nice system. Therefore, they're investing in communist and socialist ideals. And why are they doing that? They're trying to, attack our ideal capitalist, market-loving, freedom-loving system. They have come from that system, that socialist system of Hungary or Poland or where the fuck these people are supposedly from. And they're here, they're investing money in order to putting money down in order to make our system communist and socialist, and that's all bad. This is basically the talking point of media. It has levels. A few, consider maybe there is a whole ideal set, and then some people think there's a specific individual involved in this. Anyway, it doesn't matter. The idea, it comes from the right wing, and when we say right wing means we mean rich people and people who defend the right of the rich people because they themselves really like to be rich, so they defend rich people. So by defending them, so they can somehow suck up to them, maybe they get rich too. So that's the whole right-wing business. It's sort of like people who have been successful and people who aspire very much to be successful at whatever price. Therefore, they start sucking up to the rich people in order to get somewhere with their help. So that's usually who the main advocates are. Rich people and people who work for them or for their benefit. Here's the thing. Do you remember McCarthyism? Apparently, it started in February of 1950. The month of February 1950, McCarthy himself made a speech, and the whole shit show began. And the shit show was about, if this is the shit show, what was it about? It was about if you have any socialist or communist ideals, or any part of any kind of union, and you like to think and talk about unions and workers' rights and any of that, we're gonna fuck you. We're gonna blackball you. We're gonna maybe take you to court for anti-American activities and blackball you, do this and do that and whatever. Because one thing we can't stand is communism. Okay, or any communism or socialism or any kind of isms except capitalism. Anyway, my point is this: do you remember that in the 1950s, this common knowledge? You can tell from the movies and the level of, the movies from 1950s are very odd in terms of their plot and this and that, and the rhythm of the movie is very different from today's movies, but they go in depth. Sophisticated people go in depth. Educated people can go in depth. So 1950s people of 1950s in North America, although they were not as, wealthy as today, or information was not as much available for them as it is today, but they had some kind of a depth. The plots are very, have a depth to it. It's just not all murder and police and murder and police. NCIS this and NCIS that. They have some depth, philosophical depth to them. They're not Transformers. There weren't many Transformers fans in the 1950s in North America. And my point is this: in 1950 they start doing, and 1950s were the last time in North America, in Uncle Sam's land. It was the last time a worker, a top executive of a corporation, was making about 20 times the lowest paid worker. 20 times. So that means basically the corporation was small enough that the top guy would see the bottom guy probably every day, and he would make about 20 times what the bottom guy is making. That's about the best size of corporation if you want to go with the capitalist system. The best size of corporation, because as the corporation gets bigger, the top guy never meets most of his employees, and on the other hand, the thing is so big that the top guy is making like $40 million a year, $100 million a year, and the bottom guy is like on the $30,000-$40,000 a year range. So just start counting. It's like 50 times, 500 times, I don't know, do the math. But it's no longer 20 times. The boss is not the top guy in the corporation. It's having 20 times his lowest paid employee. It makes like 200 times. My point is this, or 700 times. Once I saw one of these statistics, it was like it went from 20 to 2,000. The difference, for example, in some very specific corporation that's actually reached the level of the highest member is getting 2,000 times more than the lowest member. Anyway, this is just goes hand in hand with the size of corporation, which if you don't implement antitrust laws, eventually these corporations will eat each other and merge and form bigger corporations, and therefore there used to be two people getting paid $40 million a year. The next merger is going to be one person who's making $70 million a year. So two became one. You go like this, then the two $70 million a year CEOs merge, and one of them ends up with 160, 170. Not exactly double, they save money because now they don't pay two CEOs, but still the one CEO is going to say, I'm doing two people's jobs, so I gotta pay, which he's not. He just hires a couple of more assistants and they do two people's jobs. So my point is this: the last time that they told you McCarthyism started, and the whole idea of forget about communism, socialism, trade unions, workers unions is looked down upon and under suspicion, and because of their contacts with the mob, and the system could have cleaned up the mob. The mob was working with and for the systems. Well known facts that many of the mobs have direct contact with some official branch, ATF, FBI, CIA. Mobs had these agencies' backings. It's it's common knowledge. It's like the CIA owned the Irish, the Italian mafia, and the FBI owned the Irish mafia. And Hollywood owns all the, you know, California mob. My point is this. They told you about McCarthy. McCarthyism started exactly when capitalism was still young. The top boss was making 20 times the lowest paid employee. Then these companies started merging, and the pay of the top boss went up, and the pay to the bottom guy either remained the same or went down relatively, because remaining the same while inflation is in effect, your wage remaining the same means your wage is going down. So when these workers found out that their boss keeps getting richer and richer, they protested. They say, hey, what the fuck? You know, these few people at the top and the shareholders who already had the money are getting richer and richer, but our pay is not raising. So from 1950s, and at that time, these people were well educated. They had deep philosophical thoughts because their arts, their movies, and their TV series say that they had depth to them, much more depth than people have today in North America because of bad educational system. When there is no depth, when you know fashion becomes very important. When fashion becomes very important, there's no depth, because fashion is basically trying to camouflage, trying to not to stand out, trying to follow. That's what fashion is. And followers, people with no depth follow. They don't think for themselves. They just follow the crowd, follow whatever they're saying. The whole idea of lynching was about two crazy people wanted to lynch somebody, but people without depth gather around because they also want to they don't want to participate, they don't want to prevent it, but they follow the crowd. So lynching happens. My point is this: still, and that's whole idea of the looting and you know taking taking things into citizens taking things into their hands and start smashing each other. That's lack of depth. What has created lack of depth? Bad education. Bad education. So my point is this: why bad education? Because the the family is poor and the system says it needs money to educate your children. The system says it wants money to educate your children, and then but the family is poor, so that means they get shitty education. So who loses? The society loses. For every person that is less educated, the society loses. This is not just the family's loss when the children are uneducated. It's the society's loss. You raise people until 18, and due to lack of education, due to lack of depth, because of $200 or $50, or they get into they get killed. They kill each other for small amounts of money or small, material prizes and goods. That's lack of depth. So my point is this: the lack of depth comes from lack of education. So from 1950s, the capitalists started saying, no, communism is bad, and it's okay for the CEO to make $2,000. Start going up from 20 to 30, 40, 50, 60. Now it's like 2,000 times more. The CEO makes 2,000 times more than the lowest paid employee. It started from 20, 30, 40, 50. And the protest started, and all the protests started, and the communism, socialism, and trade unions, and this and that and the other, they all started, and then McCarthyism came down on them and said, nope, These are all socialist ideas and communist ideas. What has happened since the quality of services that the majority in the society can afford has gone down? The quality of the services of the which the majority of society can afford has gone down. Yes, there is still Harvard and Yale. Is the quality of those institutions that the rich can afford has gone up much higher. It's like Howard's Harvard's endowment is in within high billions of dollars. So the quality of the education that the richest people get has gone up, can purchase has gone up, and the quality of the education that the poor people can purchase has gone down. Education that the poor people can afford is usually a free education. And the tribal leaders should have their first duty is to provide the best education they can at almost no cost, because you want the members of the tribe to be more educated. If you don't, they're not going to be sophisticated. They're going to make poor choices, shoot at each other over $50. That's and then Miss or Mrs. Ann Coulter comes out and say these are all problems of black people. No, it's not. It's the problems of lack of education, because your education system is not working for the poor. If you can't buy a good education, you don't get educated. Fuck you. So why this has reached the point has at the same time that the CEOs are making 2,000 times more than their lowest paid employee. It's the same time that the majority of society can't afford a good education for their children from the start, can't afford it because, do you see the relevance here? The CEO is went from 20 times to 2,000 times more than the lowest paid employee, and more number of people can't afford a good education for their children. And the government is not providing, doesn't seem obligated to provide a good education to its citizens. So what happens? What happens? So McCarthyism actually end up being bad for Uncle Sam's land, because when the workers protested right there in the 1950s under the disguise of you know under the facade of anti-American activity, all were blackballed or jailed or whatever. They became persona non grata in the society. And what happened since then? It has been a downward trajectory for the majority of society. That's lower class and middle class makes up the majority of society. It has been going downhill in terms of a good education for the majority of society, not for the guys who can afford it. It has been going downhill. For the majority of the society, this has been a downhill trajectory. For quality of life, healthcare, education, housing, since the 1950s in North America. It's been going down. Why it's been going down? Because Warren Buffett makes like $40 million a year or $100 million a year. He basically does nothing. Goes to his office, sits around a little, takes a piss, has a coffee, takes a piss, and goes home and takes home $100 million a year. For example, I'm saying, poor guy, I'm not picking on him. But there are many like him, many. But still many that, as I said, as these corporations have integrated and become bigger and bigger, although at the end of the day there was some savings in cost savings in the in the wages for the executives who remained, although there was, some savings, but eventually over time they got paid even more than double. You know, again, old boys network. And not anybody can be a CEO. It's an old boys network, and people who know each other from, I guess, from the whorehouse. They know each other. So, my point is this, that again, the funny thing is, after 75 years of 1950s, 60, 70, 80, 90, 2010, after 70 years, after 70 years of full throttle capitalism, now they're coming and saying that, you see, all these problems is the problems of communism and socialism. You don't have communism or socialism. You can't attribute the problems of capitalism for 75 years, the problems of capitalism that has been pushed down for 75 years, since at least the 1950s, which basically said, if you protest your standard of living as compared to the standard of living of the CEO, if you protest that you're anti-American or anti-Canadian or anti-Mexican. They came down hard on communists. You call them communists, socialists, or whoever is protest his shitty pay as compared to the boss's pay. If you do that, you're a bad person. Ever since then, the quality of life for the lower and the middle class has gone down, and quality of life for the upper class has gone up. The guy has got so much money, he injects himself with plasma of 15-year-old or 18-year-old kids. Buys plasma of 18-year-old kids and he injects himself, and the money that he pays, it's nominal for him, but it actually puts food on the table of somebody who's selling plasma to stay alive at 18. A society which produces people who have to sell plasma at 18 to make ends meet. This is a result of McCarthyism. This is not the result of communism. You never had communism. You never had socialism. Oh, you're saying, oh, these ideas are coming. They're not here yet. They're coming. And just because they're coming, suddenly you see these these protests and these, things are not going well. And everybody's pissed. These are not problems of communism or socialism because you never had it. These are all the chickens of capitalism that have come home to roost. If the people are simple-minded and simply twisted, because the system didn't educate them. If the people are unhoused because, too much money in too many few hands, and the guy who's working for somebody is not getting paid enough to have a house. Why? Because the CEO has enough money to have not a house, not 20 houses, not 30 houses. He has his own apartment. He has bought his own apartment complex, and he rents it out. He has 500 houses that he rents out, and he has a couple of yachts, and he has warehouses. Yeah, again, nothing wrong with it, as long as we go back to the 1940s and you say 1950s, and you say the standard is that you can actually make it a cultural norm. that the boss would be ashamed if the boss gets paid more than 20 times his lowest paid employee. And that means many corporations have to break up, and not so much value be given to the investors, some value, but mostly to the workers, to the employees. So because the investors are investing their extra money, the employees need that money to educate their children. Either the government has to provide education for free, or the employer has to pay enough, either decrease his own salary and pay the rest of it to his employee, or increase their salary and create inflation. Somehow this money has to come from somewhere for these two to go back to that ratio, 20 to 1, no more. Highest paid CEO, the highest pay has to be no more than 20 times the lowest paid employee. You want to call that communism? Go right ahead. You want to call that socialism? Go right ahead. But by fighting this and saying that, trying to, they keep calling transgenders as a leftist ideal. What the fuck are you talking about? Leftist idea is left, economic left, period. Transgenderism and these gays and this gay rights and transgender rights and children's rights, in this rights and that rights and the other, these all come from the individualism that is the foundation of Anglo-Saxon mentality, state of being, theory, doctrine. Freedom of choice and freedom this, freedom that, freedom of the other. Eventually, has reached to people of very margins of the society. Individuals, even at the margins of the society, also want to, claim their space. That's the whole idea behind transgenders and gays and this and that. Has nothing to do with the left. And Marx or Engels or anybody else was, particularly found or upset about transgenders or gays or this or that. This all comes from individuality, the right of individual. You want to honor that, continue honoring that, go right ahead. You don't want to honor it, don't go right ahead. But the point that you're trying to attach these individuality connected ways in your society to somehow to the economic left, that they all go together. It's all communism. No, it's not. What the fuck are you talking about, Mr. Carlson? What are you talking about? No, it's not all communism. It has nothing to do with socialism or communism. What you see today is a result of capitalism, and it started from the 1950s. Whether Mr. Soros is investing money here or investing money, I don't know. I don't care. Whether World Bank or this, I don't know. What I do know, what is clear, is that the whole McCarthyism was the wrong way to go, and continuation of McCarthyism into economic ideas of Reagan and actually CIA and FBI helping the mob to infiltrate these trade unions, so which by association they can kind of get rid of both of them. The whole idea of Hamas and Gaza, the people of Palestine and Hamas, the whole idea is that they start something, so we go kill all of them. There's a small group who starts something, and then we go and kill all of them, and we plow the land. That's the whole idea. Have the mob infiltrate trade unions, and then in the middle, not only when you get rid of certain mobs, you also get rid of their trade union apparatus by claiming that the whole thing was a criminal enterprise. That those trade unions what got rid of, and whatever remained Reagan got rid of, and ever since the middle class and the lower class has been going downhill in terms of the services that the tribe has to provide somehow. Either pay him or provide to him for free. Somehow good education has to be provided for all members of society. If you don't want gangbangers in your streets, this is not difficult to understand. How is this Soros ideas? How is this the leftist idea? You don't educate your people because you don't pay them enough to educate themselves, or you don't provide free education. So nobody's educating, but somehow you feel your people have to behave. How? And if they're not behaving, Soros is paying them to misbehave. No, this is, they're pissed off. They're uneducated, unskilled, unhoused, and unhealthy. They don't need Soros to tell them that they're unhealthy and uneducated and unhoused. They don't need Soros money to tell them that. They don't need leftist money. They don't need anybody else's money. They can tell. There is internet. They see. There are some other people over someplace else. They seem very much more sophisticated than us. They speak multiple languages and, have a depth to them. And my children don't have any depth to them. So I'm a little pissed off. Now you want to tell me that I'm a little pissed off because Soros paid me or Hamas paid? Are you fucking kidding me? What is fact is fact. If you have money, you get good education, generation after generation, and if you don't have money, you don't get any education, and somehow you're still allowed to participate in an election. An electorate that is not educated is a simple-minded electorate which will vote for George W. Bush. Because, like have a beer with the guy. Well, I really would not like to have a beer with George W. Bush because he probably pulls a couple of pranks and, makes small talk from here till November. And, things that I'm not interested in. So, yeah, but, most people, you can make them sophisticated, but you can make them also cringe at having beer with George W. Bush, but they have to be sophisticated. That means they have to be educated. That means democracy will not work if they're not educated. Their opinion will be a bad opinion because it's not educated opinion. As simple as that. Opinion will become a bad. Opinions are not equal. Some opinions are bad because it comes from an uneducated mind. Some opinions are good because it comes from a more educated, nuanced, sophisticated mind. That's why we quote people. Somebody somewhere some time ago said this. He wasn't a, vacuum salesman. He was a philosopher. And whatever that he said is very nice. Makes a lot of sense in many aspects. And these sayings are usually very opaque. But that mind is a mind that you want him to vote for in election. A simple mind, you don't want a simple mind to vote for in election. Solution is not to prevent people from voting. Solution is to educate them. So they have a sophisticated mind, so they can vote well, so they vote for the guy who they like to have beer with, and that guy happens to be a sophisticated guy, a well-educated guy, well-informed guy, not with accolades, but well-informed, a philosopher. average people, people who are not educated, they don't like to have a beer with a philosopher. What the fuck do I want to have a beer with a philosopher for? He's gonna talk his ass off. And most of the time, I'm just, I'm going to be thinking about my dog or my pussy back home. You see where I'm going with this? So my point is this, that this they're trying to sell you the fruits of capitalism as communism. Literally, they're trying to sell you the fruits of capitalism, really ripe fruits of capitalism. Doesn't get any riper than this. When the CEO, Mr. Jeff Bezos, can own his yacht, has a yacht for supplies, that, and then his employees who are either robots or people who have to pee in the bottle to because they don't get a pee break, and what the income they do get is barely enough to cover their roof, cover a roof over their head. Forget about having children. Forget about even marriage. Forget about having children. Forget about anything, because it's just minimum wages. You're just enough to keep a roof over your head. Are you fucking kidding me? And you're trying to tell me if these people protest, it's because they have been coaxed into protesting, and they have been brainwashed by common. The guy can't make enough. The system is not providing him with enough to eat. Does anybody need to pay him to go protest? The system has not provided him with a free education, and his parents, his single mother, did not make enough to provide him with an expensive education. So the guy didn't get an education. Has got a minimum wage job which barely keeps a roof over his head. And now the right is saying that George Soros and people like him are paying him to be so pissed off. And they're paying him to protest. Just like these folks, from Israel is just demolishing the fucking place and taking it over. And, some of these right-wingers, some of these colonialists, some of these pinkskins are basically saying that no, whoever is protesting is being paid by Hamas and other countries in the Middle East. And you're thinking to yourself, I'm sorry, it's in their messenger pictures of many dead bodies arrives daily, and they read the stories about them and see the pictures and videos, which you can't block. Nobody can block the internet at this point. And you're telling us that somebody has to pay these people to protest this shit? It's amazing. It's sort of like, no. You don't understand. The idea behind getting paid to do something is that you don't want to do it, or you don't particularly interested in doing it. Then you get paid, and then you do. It's sort of like these people who work for think tanks. They have an opinion. They can have an opinion. Depends on who pays them how much. And if the pay is enough, they state their opinion. So my point is this, that end stage capitalism has brought you these very ripe fruits. CEO getting paid 2,000 times the lowest paid employee, and so the lowest paid employee can't get married, can't have children. If he does, he can't afford the education of the children. All because Jeff Bezos is making 2,000 times his income, but somehow you're associating this frustration of this young fellow, whether it be black or white, Black Lives Matter. A lot of these Black Lives Matter protests, I don't care about the criminality of people who registered some kind of corporations and started vacuuming money because they registered the name first and send out flyers. No, the whole protest idea was because the system hadn't educated them, give them enough skills, and there is no job available in the society for them to provide them with an income that would produce an average living, normal living, middle class living. The system hasn't done that. Whoever has come up with the system is not functioning. It was functioning in the 1950s, 40s. In 20s and 10s it didn't crumble. But the point is this: who has brought this system to this point of certain majority of people not being afford to live in a society? And if they go and protest this not being able to afford to live, when they go to protest it, they're told that, oh no, these people are paid by Soros, or Soros has financed these protests. The guy can't eat. He is attended so he can eat. Protest so he can eat. Maybe Mr. Bezos takes a little less money home and trade his girlfriend with a with a blow-up doll. Maybe do that so this guy can have family and have children. But you can't do that. That's communism. That's George Soros. If anybody does that, this is George Soros money talking. What the fuck are you talking about? What are you talking about? Why he can't eat? Why can't he marry? Why he can't have children? Because 1950s, when this trend of not trying to be not forward looking in terms of social stability, in the 1950s was the time the system stopped being forward looking in terms of social cohesion and social stability. Those people who were part of the Communist Party or had socialist ideas were the ones who were actually thinking about today, thinking about there would be a day if things go as they were. That means the CEO gets paid more and more. Now it's 20, the next 5 years it's going to be 30 times, 40 times, 50 times, until now that it's 2,000 times the lowest paid employee. They saw that. They were a little smarter. They saw that. They got together. But the forces of rich people got together and said, no, stop this. This is anti-American. What, eating is anti-American? Having enough money to educate your children is anti-American? Expecting a good health care from your tribe is anti-American? But the trend started in 1950s. And Mr. Reagan came and completed the trend. And ever since, no antitrust is just not applied any longer. So, and everything is national security, and you can't talk about this and you can't talk about that, you can't protest this and you can't protest that. And this is, and somehow somebody they try to tell you that this is problems of communism, socialism. But you never had and you don't have communism or socialism. How can you have the problems of communism and socialism if you never had communism or socialism? You got the problems of capitalism. The guy can't eat, so he protests, and you tell me that these protests are the problems of socialism. No, my friend, if he could eat, if he could have children, he wouldn't be protesting. He would be at home eating his fried chicken and watching his football. Doesn't matter how much Soros was paying him. You have to be fed up to go protest. You know who goes protest because of money? Mobsters. Mobsters are the only ones who protest because of money. And you gotta pay them a lot. Average people don't go protesting because somebody paid them something. Are you kidding me? So no, I don't think it's George Soros money or this money or that money. I don't, just like I don't think it's this, these are problems of capitalism. Just like I don't think these are the problems of capitalism. I do think these are problems of, I don't think these are problems of communism or socialism, because you never practice communism or socialism. And you keep saying that this is not capitalism, this is crony capitalism. And these are the problems of crony capitalism. Well, the problem is any kind of capitalism eventually turns into crony capitalism. Because politicians like money, because it's capitalism. Politicians like money, and rich people like politicians. Again, capitalism. Because of the laws that can enact to help rich people. So eventually, rich people and politicians will, if it's democracy, eventually rich people and politicians get together because they both like each other. They can help each other a lot and cut the little man out in terms of trade unions, in terms of military industrial complex, in terms of antitrust laws, in terms of all of that. So politicians and rich people eventually will find each other. And you like to practice, you know, capitalism along with democracy. That's basically, the rich people's form of economy and the political class form of government. They find each other and they form the military industrial complex. Politicians protect the rights of the arms manufacturers to have as big a profit as they can have, because they pay a lot for their campaign. So my point is this crony capitalism business is every time happens in a democracy, because the government is not on top. The rich people in the capitalist system, the government, on the face of it, the government is on top, but people who control the government are the rich people, which a system like Chinese system has prevented. The people in charge can control rich people because they're above them. I think that's not a bad idea, because again, if you go back to breaking up all these large corporations and going back to the 1950s, reduce the size of these corporations to an extent that it would go back to the boss making only 20 times the lowest paid employee. If we go back to that, then all problems are solved. People are making enough to educate their children, put a roof over their head, have a family. All of this problem is solved. If we go back to 20 to 1. But, that's socialism, right? That's anti-American activities. Yeah. please don't associate, please don't associate the fruits of capitalism with socialism or communism. You can't practice capitalism for 75 years, 100 years, 200 years, 300. You can't practice capitalism for so long and unrestricted capitalism for the last portion, and then associate its fruits with something like communism or socialism. No, 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 please. If you break up the corporations to such a small pieces that automatically in those small pieces the boss would be making 20 times its lowest paid employee, because you can't have a corporation with 500 people and the boss making 2,000 times its lowest paid employees. You can't have that. You see what I'm saying? Just because the income of the corporation is not there. It's just not there. It's got 500 employees and the boss makes 20 times the lowest paid employee. And one way to go about this is literally you tell Mr. Bezos exactly that. Exactly that. It's sort of like you cannot make more than 20 times your janitor. The janitorial staff who goes over there and cleans up. I'm sure, the cleaning is not yet mechanized. But even if the night watchman, if the night watchman, whatever the security guard at the gate of one of his warehouses is working, he should not be able to make more than 20 times his income. If you go to that, the rest of it he has to sell and he has to invest the money in designated places. But he can't be the beneficiary of so much income, period. Because this income is keep accumulating at the top. And when the bottom people don't have any, call it, oh, this is, if they protest, it's communism and Soros has paid for it. I'm sorry, I don't know Mr. Soros. But you really don't have to know any other issues that the patient has. If the patient comes in with a with a with his gut hanging out, you don't need to know if he also has cholesterol or high blood pressure. You don't need to know that. Maybe Mr. Soros is positive or negative, or other Mr. Murdoch or other Mr. Bezos, other wealthy individual. You don't know whether they're positive or negative. That's in terms of cholesterol and high blood pressure and this and that. Yes, they may be present. But you can't tell me that CEO making 2,000 times the lowest paid employee, and therefore the lowest paid employee cannot afford healthcare, housing, or education, which none of it is provided by the government for free, and he has to pay for it. But what he's making in the in the competitive world of employment, what he's making is not enough to have 4 kids. Apparently 4 kids is the minimum. People who have kids, they should have 4 kids to make up for people who have no kids. So the replacement number is 4 kids. So my point is this, that your system is not providing that for free, because you're not communist and you're not socialist. These essential services are not provided for free by the government. But the guy, in the jobs available to him in the marketplace of workers, the jobs available to him with the skills that he got, because your system didn't teach him any skills, because his parent didn't have enough money to invest in his education. So you keep going through the same circle of generation after generation, not having enough to invest in the education of their children. Their children come out of educational system unskilled and uninformed, and then you're trying to blame this system that capitalism has produced. You're trying to blame the result of this system on communism. What the fuck are you talking about? Again, this is a the guy coming through the emergency room with his gut hanging out. These are problems of capitalism. Fix this. Break down all these large corporations to such an extent that it goes back to the 1950s. Only local corporations with no more than 500 employees, and you can actually make that to a law. No corporation should have more than 500 employees, period. In this case, and only in this case, you can make sure that the top guy is going to only make 220 times more than his lowest paid employee. If you just keep the number down, make a number of it. You cannot have 501 employee. You can only have 500, period. If so therefore, in this way, you can stop mergers of corporations. 500 employees or 500 robots. Just if you make this into a law that says either you can have 500 employees or 500 robots and no more as a CEO. In this way, you prevent any kind of mergers from taking place, and you can keep your capitalist system alive. And when there are so many small corporations like this, buying politicians is not going to be easy. You see what I'm saying? Here's another thing. When corporations are small, either they all buy the same politicians or none of them can. Therefore, politicians also become modest in their ways and means, because there's like 500 shoemakers in the guy's state. There is 500 bread makers in the guy's state. There is not one big one who can fill the coffers of the politician all by himself. There is no Mr. Adelson. You see what I'm saying? There are 500 little Adelsons, but there is no one big Adelson. Therefore, views vary, perspectives vary, and the politician has to remain modest, in the middle, centrist, because there is 500 relatively rich people, not ultra rich. The problem is the ultra rich. The problem is when the CEO is, making 50 times the politician. If the CEO was making as much as the politician was making, I'm not saying the politicians are not getting paid enough. I'm saying the CEOs are getting paid too much. If the CEO was, if there was no CEO that was making more than the top politician, then let's say president. If there was no CEO that was making more than the president, then the president could not be corrupted at that point. because who's there to buy him? The top CEOs are making as much as him. Why? Because they have been restricted to having no more than 500 employees or robots. Therefore, their power is limited because they only are making 20 times their lowest paid employee, just like a politician is his income is right now. Probably much less, but still, I mean, even Supreme Court judges are taking bribes. Why? Not because they want to. You don't think Clarence Thomas is proud enough not to want to take a bribe? But when he sees what he is making as compared to the CEO of that corporation, that was his friend, when he compared the numbers and he's like, holy shit. Well, I guess I deserve that. I reached this place. If somebody wants to be helpful to me, I appreciate it because the job certainly is not paying what I thought it should be paying. This is not because the Supreme Courts are not making enough. So Supreme Court judges are not making enough. This is because CEOs are making too much. There should be an upper limit to income. Period. "20 times your lowest paid employee." The richest person in the society is not making more than 20 times the lowest person in society. In that case, you don't have to be communist. Then you can say we are capitalists, but our richest person is making only 20 times the lowest paid person. Still is quite considerable. The lowest guy making $100,000 a year. The richest guy is making what? 100,000, 1 million, 10 million, $20 million a year. Still, when you make $20 million a year, I'm sorry, 100,000, just 1 0, 2 million. When you make $2 million a year, as compared to a guy who makes $100,000 a year, you're very rich. You're making 20 times. I think that's ideal. In that way, you don't have to become communist. You don't have to become socialist. Only in that case, government doesn't have to provide free healthcare and free education and free housing. Only in that case. But if you continue down this road of the CEOs making 2,000 times their lowest paid employee, eventually at one point the government has to step in and provide free education, free housing, and free healthcare. Because all the numbers, all the dough, all the money keeps finding its way up to the guy who's making 2,000 times what I'm making. If you don't want government provided this and government provided that, then you gotta go back to 20 to 1 proportionality between the highest paid employee and the lowest paid employee, or 500 employee, the maximum number of people under one corporation, period, and no subcontracting out. And subcontracting out is normal, but calling every employee as a subcontractor, that's just capitalist bullshit. I don't have employees, I have subcontractors. Every man is a corporation. Corporations are people and people are corporation. When you don't treat your people like people, you treat them like less than people, like these people don't require housing, healthcare, or education. If they can pay for it, good for them. If they can't pay for it, fuck them. If you don't treat your tribesmen the way you should treat your tribesmen, don't whine when your tribesmen don't behave in a civil manner. You either educate them, teach them to behave in a civil manner, or you don't. You either want to spend money in education, housing, and healthcare, or you don't want to spend money in education, housing, and healthcare, and you want to spend money on warfare. But you can't spend all your money on warfare, then complain that why these people are not educated, and that people are not educated, and the other people are not educated or misbehaving. And then say, oh, this is a result of communism, socialism, and George Soros is, and that is because George Soros is paying for it. Paying for what? Paying for the guy so the guy can realize he can't eat or have children because he can't afford it. Because Mr. Bezos, he can't afford it because Mr. Bezos has a yacht to carry supplies for his yacht.